Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Shh, I've got no rhythm. Today I'm going to do a tag, the modern literary canon tag that I just saw on the table. I just saw Brian at Bookish do. This was originated, I believe, by Russell at Ink and Paper blog about 3 years ago. But I just saw Brian do it. I thought it was really fun, and it's one of those tags where you just get to talk about a lot of books, which is my kind of thing. While I have you here, I'm going to link below, and I would direct you all to look at an obituary that was published this week in the Irish Times of a publisher of children's literature in Ireland, a chap called Michael O'Brien, who just passed away, and the company is now run by his son, Ivan O'Brien, and someone sent me this obituary to look at. I knew nothing about O'Brien Books, O'Brien Publishing, O'Brien Press. They publish a lot of children's books. They've been going for decades. And reading through, the reason someone sent me the obituary is because as you read through the life of Michael O'Brien, a proud Irish publisher of Irish books, about halfway down when it starts talking about his parents, it turns out, and there's a lot of information about his background, and on his mother's side, turns out he was my cousin. Not a lot of Jewish O'Briens in the world, but it turns out that the late Michael O'Brien would have been my dad's second cousin. His mother was a Sevet, and just super fascinating. I learned about parts of my family's history from reading this obituary because it turns out Michael O'Brien had been researching it. Fascinating. I'll put it in there because it's kind of got a literary bent, but it tells you all about the my father's side of the family who left what the reference in the obituary they call the Crimea, Ukraine, back in the late 19th century, and went to London and Cork, and both ended up in Dublin, two brothers. Anyway, fascinating. It's there. Wishing no more sorrow for the O'Brien family, my cousins over in Dublin. Okay, so the modern literary canon, this is 5 authors in each of 3 categories. And the first category is what 5 authors form your modern canon literary foundation. So authors no longer with us that are published in the last 100 years. It wasn't even in the 20th century. In the last in the last 100 years, whose work have stood the test of time. So I'm using, listen, this is all subjective. So I'm using this whole tag to talk about authors that are in my literary canon. And I'll try and make a case why they should be in the literary canon. But some of these are authors that I've spoken about before, some I've never spoken about before, some which don't get discussed much on BookTube. But we'll just kick it off and get going. Okay, so for me, number 1, so authors no longer with us, published in the last 100 years in my modern literary canon. We'll start with Anthony Burgess, and I picked out Earthly Powers, which is just an outstanding one of his first introductions. So the first line you need to know is there is more to Anthony Burgess than A Clockwork Orange. Read A Clockwork Orange because it's an astonishing, life-changing work, but at least in my reading career as a sort of independent reader, aged 18, 19 plus, Burgess featured very heavily. So when I came to Israel for a year, spent a year on kibbutz after high school, so a year on kibbutz and then a year in seminary, we were all reading Anthony Burgess. Not this edition, my edition fell apart, and I bought another copy, the same edition with this that Penguin published a whole bunch with this kind of cover. My copy got passed around, read by everybody, and destroyed. And another copy is the end of the world news. I read a whole bunch of his novels and just had a huge influence on. If you have any love of giant works of literary fiction, everything that you're reading today, every great big sweeping epic novel that covers 50, 60 years of a life and with beautifully crafted sentences and a through line that comes together in astonishing ways, this is the archetype of that. Earthly Powers, I'm always astonished that more people are not reading Burgess's back catalogue. I haven't read him for 25 years because we kind of binged him. I read sort of 7, 8 novels in the course of 3 or 4 years. But I know there's more back there that I haven't gone back to, and maybe I will. And there's I think at least 2 volumes of autobiography. But I urge people, go back, discover Anthony Burgess. You will not be disappointed. Earthly Powers is I think, his masterwork. Well, not just me, lots of people think it's his masterwork. Okay, another author, I think already in the literary canon, much more discussed on BookTube, but these books also had an impact on me in my early 20s. I came to these. This is Maya Angelou's set of the first 5 in her autobiography. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, All God's Children in Traveling Shoes, The Heart of Woman, Singing and Swinging, Getting Merry Like Christmas, and Gathered Together in My Name. I think I've got that in the right order. No, I haven't got that in the right order. Go on to, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Gathered Together in My Name, Singing as We Get in My... I need to put these back in the right order. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Gathered Together in My Name, Singing and Swinging, Getting Merry Like Christmas. No, that one. Heart of a Woman. And All God's Children in Traveling Shoes. Okay. That order. These. I don't know why I started reading Maya Angelou. I must have bought these all round about the same time. I've got these lovely Virago Press editions. I may have bought some of these in my university bookshop. I may have gone up to town and bought some of them in Silver Moon Bookshop, which used to be a feminist bookshop on the Charing Cross Road, now no longer there. But just somehow her name must have been around, and I decided I wanted to read this. And once I started reading the series, I kept reading them, and just a story of her, first of all, an incredible life, a story of America, of being black in America, of discovering what it means to be black in America. And I think an influence on me, I may have discussed this before, Maya Angelou visits Africa for the first time, and her experience of being able to walk around. She was a very tall woman, being able to walk around with her shoulders back and her head up as a black woman in Africa is very moving. And without, again, no comparisons, and not trying to appropriate one culture to another, but my experience moving to Israel as a Jew, wearing kippah, there was a similar sense of everyone here is kind of like me. I was never oppressed or enslaved or anything like that, but it inspired my desire to move to Israel in some ways, but just on its own right. It's just a fantastic reading experience. I recommend all 5, and there were another couple of volumes I think published later, which I never got to, which are sort of half prose, half poetry, but recommended. And I love the fact that her poem "And Still I Rise" is still being read and learned today, and it's very, very moving, and distills a lot of what you get in these 5 volumes. Again, something not a lot of people talk about, and I don't talk about him so much because I read all these books 30 years ago, but very much formative works for me. Raymond Chandler, definitely in the literary canon, writing in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This is The Long Goodbye, which is an astonishing expression of style over content. And what I mean by that is you can read The Long Goodbye several times and still not work out who did what and why, but the prose is just exquisite, which seems an odd thing to say for a detective novel set in Southern California, but it is absolutely true. You read Chandler, and although these are plotty novels and detective stories, and Philip Marlowe is an icon and a grizzled, hard-boiled, romantic knight. It's just set in 30s, 40s LA, but these are more about the style and the crafting of beautiful sentences and hilarious metaphors than working out how such and such happened and who killed who and why. Exquisite, fantastic. Everyone should read Chandler. There are a series of quite short novels and some short stories, and even some non-fiction. His novel "The Art of Murder" is non-fiction essay. "The Art of Murder" is well worth reading if you have any interest in crime fiction, the sort of Chekhov idea that if you see a gun in the first act, it needs to go off. Chandler is very much of that school of thinking, that sometimes a man with a gun is the solution to a problem. Great stuff. Raymond Chandler, read the novels and feel free to explore further, but definitely part of my modern literary canon. There are a bunch of great big authors, dead white men who I decided to still down. So I left John Updike out, but he was a bit, I read a lot of John Updike again in my early 20s. But for me, the one that tops it all, probably not a popular choice, but Philip Roth. I read Portnoy's Complaint when I was young, and then when he had his late career renaissance with Sabbath Theatre and the other one about when he comes to Israel. Anyway, then American Pastoral wins the something award, wins a big award, and is followed by just an outstanding run of late career novels. I Married a Communist, The Human Stain, The Plot Against America, each one of them more brilliant than the last. Again, I think remains mostly unread amongst our corner of BookTube, and it's a shame. These are first-class novels. He may have been a deeply unpleasant character, but the novels, I believe, are unimpeachable, and as a series, each one works on its own. Nathan Zuckerman drifts in and out as a character. He's an authorial device, a replacement for Philip Roth, and he ages over the course of Roth's career, and he appears in novels sometimes as a participant in the narrative, sometimes as a narrator. But other than that sort of thread running through each of these is a standalone work, and just great. Say Pastoral, Human Stain is just a beast of a novel, fantastic. And The Plot Against America is, if you haven't read Plot Against America, do. It's an urgent, prescient, current book about America drifting towards fascism. I recommend American Pastoral, Philip Roth. And then the last one I want to put in the literary canon, there are others I could put in, people who are no longer with us, but this was an author that is meaningful to me and interesting because non-fiction. So I picked out a couple of works by Oliver Sacks. I've got 4 or 5 more books by him up there. Classic, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. One of my favourite books is Seeing Voices, about the hearing impaired, deaf people, and how they communicate, and how the brain processes language, whether it is verbal language or language produced by humans through other means. So that was a fascinating read. These are great anecdotes and has led me in all sorts of different directions. Following up the stories, I think I went from here to read about Temple Grandin. I've got her book, is fabulous as well. And then one of my favourite Oliver Sacks is his autobiography, Uncle Tungsten, where he describes his uncle who actually invented the tungsten light bulb, and that was, I think, the source of some of the family's wealth. They were inventors back in the UK in the 20s, 30s. But this is just a wonderful book about science, about a young boy obsessed with science and growing into the man, the empathetic, dear, kind man that Dr. Oliver Sacks was. So Oliver Sacks I'm putting in my literary canon, non-fiction works. I could have also put in someone like Primo Levi, crossing between fiction and non-fiction, but I went with Sacks for now. Okay, so the next question is, what 5 still living authors do you believe have already left a literary legacy that's firmly established as modern classics? Okay, so I have some choices here. And there, I could hundreds of these. We'll start with this one, just because I'm putting this author in lieu of the whole range of 70 plus British authors who came of age in the 80s and are still publishing today. So I include in those Ishiguro, Salman Rushdie, wishing refuah shalema to Salman Rushdie. I include Julian Barnes, I include Ian McEwan, and the one I've chosen to represent all these now grandfathers of English British literature is Martin Amis and his groundbreaking novel Money. At least in my reading experience, the first great autofiction novel. There's a character called Martin Amis who turns up and has a conversation with the main protagonist of the book, who is called, wait for it, John Self, and just a gritty, funny, searing look at Britain in the 80s, and a great novel as well, and one of several great reading experiences that I've had with Amos. There have been some less than others, but a very high hit rate in my experience. I've read 10, 12 books by Amos. So he's my already established in the modern literary canon and still with us and still publishing, although his last book, Inside Out, which was amazing, maybe his swan song, we don't know, we'll wait and see. Who else am I putting in my modern literary canon? Just because every book that I've read by this author has been revelatory and a tremendous experience for me, and that is Jhumpa Lahiri. And I read her first book, Interpreter of Maladies, a book of short stories that won the Pulitzer Prize. Bought her second book, The Namesake, and after reading this said, okay, this is an author that I'm going to read everything she publishes. And I think I pretty much have to date. Most recently, Whereabouts, which I spoke about and raved last year. Namesake is a great first collection of short stories. And followed up by a great first novel. That's a 1-2 killer combination that launched Lahiri, in my opinion, into the already established modern literary canon. The Namesake, Jhumpa Lahiri, love Lahiri. When did I read this? Bought this December 2003, so 20 years. Wow. Love that book. Another author, I think, has already done enough. And when we get to the authors, the last one, authors that are currently writing that I believe are building literary future, some of them may be older than some of the ones I've already put. I think it's to do with how much they've published and where they're accepted. So this author, still in my mind, feels like a young author, because I think she's younger than me, and it's called Sadie Smith. Adore Sadie Smith, adored everything she's done since White Teeth, which is about 20 plus years ago. I bought and read The Autograph Man when it came out, her second novel, which is sort of universally derided. I think The Guardian recently did a Where to Start with Zadie Smith. Am I getting that wrong? If I find that, I'll post that below. And they, I think they agreed that this was the best novel. I think it goes through each book and says the one to start with, the best one, the worst one, the one if you're going to a dinner party. I don't know. It's sort of Guardian, usual Guardian tribe, but good. But went through each of the novels and put them in their place. On Beauty is outstanding. This is her US campus novel. So at that stage of her career, she was being fated by universities, come teach, and she went down that route. So she's publishing novels every 3-4 years, but I believe she spent some time teaching in an American English department. And this is the novel that comes out of that, and it's outstanding. I think then she comes back to the UK and we get NW, which is also an outstanding novel. But everything I think Zadie Smith's done, and that combination, if we leave The Autograph Man aside, that run of White Teeth, On Beauty, NW, Swing Time, it's just places her very definitely already in the established literary canon. People are going to be reading these novels, I hope, for some time. Zadie Smith. Jumping over to, so we had Chandler in the authors no longer with us. The man who's still writing, who I believe is established in the literary canon, writing a sort of noirish, crime infused world. James Ellroy, again, I guess not read widely in our part of BookTube. Perhaps most well known, he was the author of the LA Quartet, which was filmed as LA Confidential. I think that was the second or third book in the quartet, Black Dahlia, LA Confidential, White Jazz, and another one. But this is the book that started it for me. I think this was the book that broke him. He'd written some pulpy detective stories beforehand. There's the Lloyd Hopkins trilogy, and then some standalones, and then American Tabloid came out and took everyone's breath away, and rightly so. It's an astonishing, relentless, pacey mishmash of reality, 1940s Hollywood speak, 1960s conspiracy theory. The FBI are in here. There's real world characters and fake characters, all crossing paths, all with a destiny, all with a propensity for violence, but a code and a love of truth and honesty. Just all life is here. If there is a case to be made for the great 20th century American novel, I would put American Tabloid up there with Gatsby. And I love The Great Gatsby. Just an astonishing, blow your head off book, and then became the first in a trilogy, The Underworld trilogy, is that right? There's this, and then 1,000 something, and then Bloods a Rover. I don't remember. Anyway, this was the one that kicked it off for me. I've read everything that Elroy has published. This book had a book out last year called Widespread Panic, which I haven't got to. I'll pick that up shortly. But I went back from this and read his earlier stuff, and I've read everything he's published going forwards. James Elroy, absolutely in the literary canon. If you ever want to enjoy yourself for 5 minutes, go and look up an interview, read an interview with James Elroy. He is a man of astonishing tastes, of dark humour, and just an interesting fellow all round. The demon dog of American literature, as he was once known. James Elroy and American Tabloid is my starting point. And then the last author I'm putting in the modern literary canon, again, for the sheer range, and in this instance, the topicality. I've got here Neil Gaiman, The Sandman, which I'm slow burning my way through on Netflix. I've watched the first 2 episodes, and I'm just going to pace them out over time, because the way I feel about most literary adaptations is I've already encountered their perfect platonic version in literary form, in this instance, in graphic novel form. This is The Sandman. This collection, Preludes and Nocturnes, collects the first 8 issues of Sandman, starting with his capture and ending up with the first appearance of his big sister, Death. So far, the first 2 episodes I saw of the Netflix show have been outstanding and very, there are panels in this which are reproduced exactly on screen. This is the first time Death is captured with his ruby, his pouch, and his mask. And that scene is very much in I think episode 1, and then when he escapes. The spell is broken and Sandman escapes, and that is absolutely recreated on screen. So I'm enjoying watching the series for that, and I'm sure I'll enjoy Neil Gaiman. But Neil Gaiman prose also, this is officially, I'll brook no argument on this, the scariest book ever written, Coraline by Neil Gaiman. This is a first British edition, I believe, that I picked up when it came out. But also the Graveyard Book, I highly recommend. American Gods, I never really loved. I know a lot of people have time for the something at the end of the lane, the ocean at the end of the lane, that one. But just across his work, I've read some of his non-fiction, his comics, his fiction for children, his non-fiction. I think Gaiman has already established himself as part of the literary canon. Okay, how are we doing? One more. What 5 authors who are currently writing or released a book in the last 10 years you believe are building the literary future? Okay, so a couple of obvious ones to begin with. Everyone, I think, has mentioned Jasmine Ward. The only reason I'm not showing you Salvage the Bones is because I must lend to someone. I've read 3 books by Jasmine Ward: Salvage the Bones, Sing Unburied Sing, the 2 novels, and then also Men We Reaped. And just word for word, sentence for sentence, just, I think, the writer of her generation. And I only imagine we will see more and greater works in the future. So that's Jasmine Ward. The other one, I'm looking through things, and I've only read 2 books by this author, and they were sort of 10 years apart. So the question has to be, have to release a book in the last 10 years. So until the recent release, which I've also, I believe, lent to someone, I've got here Suzanne Clark. So this fantastic, massive work, John and Stranger, Mr. Norrell, and her recent release, Piranesi. So she may be, I don't know if I got this right, she may be older than Sadie Smith, but in terms of the pace in which she's writing, I believe she was ill for many years. I don't even have a date on this, I just got my name. So I don't know when I first read this, but it was pretty close to publication. This was published in 2004. Piranesi came out last year, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But I think across these 2 works, I believe that Ms. Clark will be part of the future literary canon. Not just because she's writing fantasy, which is interesting and unusual in the canon, but I just think Piranesi is an outstanding work about loneliness and mental illness, and every one of us, our relationship to reality. And I really thought that was outstanding. This was a fantastic, exciting romp, but Piranesi blew me away. What else have I got here? Okay, so some of these are, so I'll do this one first. So this is also actually one that Brian mentioned, and I try not to overlap just because I think it's good to talk about a variety of authors, but again, 2 books that I've read by this author, and each one blew me away. The first one I read was The Lost Children Archive. There was a lot of buzz about this, and it's just absolutely outstanding first novel. And then and this was her first novel published that she wrote in English. So then I went back and read Tell Me How It Ends, which is translated by John Lee Anderson. These are a series of interviews that Ms. Lucelli did with people seeking asylum, people who managed to make it to America, and explained where they had escaped from, what they had left behind, why they had to leave, and it's just a terrifying, sad, hopeful look at a world that I won't make anyone else complicit, that I mostly turn away from and try not to have to deal with, because I have nothing positive to contribute. But I think Miss Lucelli has contributed something amazing and worth your time. Both these books, so the novel and this, whatever this is, collected interviews, non-fiction, however you want to describe it, absolutely is the future of the way we address things that we are perhaps afraid or scared or unwilling to address. This author also only read 2 books for, but I'm going to make the case, that's coming into shot. I'm going to make a case that this author is the future based on the 2 works that I read. First one was Grief is the Thing with Feathers. Second one was Lani, Max Porter, a young English novelist. Each of these books special in its own way. Grief is the Thing with Feathers was just a outstanding look at grief. And Lani was a beautiful, beautiful, joyous book about childhood and innocence and trust, and then this grimy, grisly, mythical character that is in the undergrowth. What is this? Dead Papa Toothwort, and then you get all the prose starts to fall apart and melt off the page, and just great reading experience. And I reckon we'll be looking this, people will be talking about this 20 years, people discovering Lani and going, wow, have you heard about this author, Max Porter? I hope he continues to publish work of this quality, because this was great. Now, the last one is taking a chance here. I don't believe she's widely read, but I think there is a chance that people will, that she'll have a breakout in the next 5-10 years, and people will go back and read the earlier stuff and say, oh yeah, she was always a genius, because she is. This is Sarah Gran, I beg your pardon. And this is the first of the Claire DeWitt books, Claire DeWitt and the City of the Dead. There have been 3 of them so far. The last one ended with a potential breaking news about everything, the thread that's been running all the way through them, and we're desperately waiting for the 4th. Sarah Gran is blogs regularly, has written stuff for TV. There are other novels out. There's 3 Claire DeWitt books, and then there are a couple of other books as well, one of which I read, Dope, was just as dark-hearted as it's possible to imagine anyone writing. And she's written extensively about struggles in publishing and how difficult it is to get someone to publish your work and have some consistency and have some faith in you as a writer, and I think has done some work for TV where there seems to be more money, more consistency, and more willingness, or at least more spaces to fill with warm bodies. And recently, I think she's taken to self-publishing, or at least setting up her own publisher, rather than self-publishing through Amazon singles or something like that, but actually set up a publishing company so that she can maintain some creative control over what she puts out. And she put out a book last year which I think was more horror inflected, so I kind of stayed away from it. But I really hope the publishing world makes room for Sarah Gran, because I think she's an enormous talent, and I believe if she has some kind of breakthrough into the mainstream, that suddenly everyone will sit up and go back and read the earlier books and say, yeah, this is the future. I think this is the future of noir fiction. I think it's the future of feminist fiction. I think Claire DeWitt is one of the great characters, a Zen detective, a prodigious user of all sorts of illegal narcotics, and a wonderful mind. These books are amazing. Look out for Sarah Gran. Go back and read them. This is the first one in the Claire DeWitt that I highly recommend. There are 2 others. Just fantastic. That's it. Wow, 30 minutes. You guys must be sick of me. God bless. Stay well. And I'll try and do more and keep up with my reading. But that's it. Thanks very much. Bye.